Hey fourth graders, Mr. Schroeder here with a little math for you. Today's goal is that students will be able to multiply fractions. This is something we have not done yet. Everything I talk about in this video will cover lessons 7.2 through 7.5. The reason I'm doing all three at the same time is because they share a lot of the same processes. So when you're all done with this video, you should be able to tackle that section of your book. Remember to take it a day at a time though, just like our schedule says. Don't overwhelm yourself. Going back to the goal, I'll read it one more time because it's important to know it. Students will be able to multiply fractions. I'm going to start you off with what you know, and we're going to work our way into how we multiply fractions. What we do know is how to multiply. We've done that many times through fourth grade. So when I look at a multiplication problem, a normal one using whole numbers or your counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. This problem looks very easy to you. 5 multiplied by 4 makes 20. I'm going to write it a few different ways just to recap on how multiplication might look. You might see 5 times 4 equals 20. So there's two different symbols that both mean the same thing, multiply. You might also see 5 multiplied by 4 makes 20. And this one's more, when you get into high school, you'll see this a little bit more often with the brackets like that. But these are three different symbols that mean the same thing, multiply. We've talked about this many a times, but I want to review one really important concept. This is probably the most important thing I'll say in the whole video. I'm going to get rid of these two other symbols, just there to, I just wrote those just so you could see what symbols we use. But the way Mr. Schroeder says this every time is 5 groups of 4. 5 groups of 4 make 20. That makes sense. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. 5 groups of 4, counting by 4s, makes 20. Another way of looking at that is like this. 4, 1 group of 4, 2 groups of 4, 3 groups of 4, 4 groups of 4, and 5 groups of 4. If I add up all of those groups, it makes 20. We've talked about this relationship a lot, how we can make multiplication into repeated addition. And that is exactly what we're going to do when we end up multiplying fractions together. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to start off with an easier problem. I'm going to take a whole number like 3, and I'm going to multiply it by a fraction like 1/4. Don't forget what we talked about. It's 3 groups of 1/4. You might read that 3 times 1/4 or 3 multiplied by 1/4. Mr. Schroeder will say it 3 groups of 1/4. That sounds a lot easier to do once I've made it into an addition problem. 1/4, that's 1 group of 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. If I add 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, I just add the numerator, 1, 2, 3, it gives me 3/4. And I'm all done. 3 groups of 1/4 is equal to 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, which gives me 3/4. If you haven't watched my video yet on how to add and subtract fractions, you definitely should do that before you continue this video. I know that when we multiply fractions, the denominator, the bottom number on the fraction, will always be the same. But it's a good recap, so if you want to go back and watch that video before you finish the rest of this, that's just fine. But we add the numerator only, keep the denominator the same. That's going to be consistent through the rest of this video too. If I get rid of this problem, I'll do another example. Pick a different whole number. It doesn't matter which side you write the whole number on because it's like a turnaround fact. If I had 5/8 and I was going to multiply it by, let's just stick with lower numbers for now, but 4. A very common problem you might see in your math journal. 5/8 times 4. Just because this might make you a little confused, I'm going to go through it real quick. 5/8 groups of 4. Ew, that doesn't make as much sense, but remember, we can just flip these around. 4 groups of 5/8 might make a little bit more sense to you. So if I do 4 groups, and each one had 5/8 in it, now when I just add all the numerators together and keep the denominators the same, if I add all this together, 5, 10, 15, 20, and the denominator stays 8. 20/8. I've told all my 4th graders before, but I would love you to reduce that type of problem or that type of answer. 20/8 is the same thing as saying 20 divided by 8, which is a problem we all can do now. 20 divided by 8. How many 8s fit into 20? I would say 2. That gets rid of 16. Once again, if you haven't watched my division video I put out, go ahead and look at that one too for little reminders on how to divide or do long division. 4. 8 can't fit into 4, so my answer is 2 and 4/8. And we all know 4/8 reduced to 1/2. So 4 times 5/8, both acceptable answers would be 20/8 or 2.5. It's the same thing. I'm going to move on just a little bit more. I'm going to add to your knowledge. I don't think we'll, in 4th grade that we'll end up doing a problem that looks like this quite yet. Like a 3/4 times a 1/2. 3/4 groups of 1/2. That's later on 5th, 6th grade. But until we get there, we're going to work on whole numbers and mixed numbers that multiply by fractions. For example, here's a whole number. Let's try 5. And this time, instead of just doing a fraction, this will be more like less than 7/5, I'm going to do a mixed number. And it's not much more complicated. 5, and I'll say I'm going to multiply that by 2 and 1/3. Take it a step at a time. Once again, this is the groups of symbol. So I know I'm going to have 5 groups of 2 and 1/3. 2 and 1/3 plus, I'll try to make it into a plus on 2 and 1/3. That's 2 groups plus 2 and 1/3. 3 groups plus 2 and 1/3. 4 groups plus 2 and 1/3. It's a lot of work. But we know how to add mixed numbers, so let's add all the wholes first. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10. Now I got to add the fractions together. 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. That's like 5 times 1/3, or 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3, 5/3. You could have the answer 10 and 5/3, but like I like to say, when you have an improper fraction where the numerator is bigger than the denominator, you have to divide or make it back into a mixed number. 5/3, if I added those together, 3/3 would be 1 whole, plus how many extra thirds do I have? 4/3, 5/3 would be 2 extra thirds. So 10 plus 3/3 is 11, plus 2 more thirds makes 11 and 2/3. Now that I've gone that far, I just want you to remember, as you do these problems, take them slow, show your work, and make drawings. I would love you to draw out the groups as you do these different problems. One last little piece of vocab I want to give you before I wrap this video up is what a unit fraction is. This says 1/5 groups of 6 or 6 groups of 1/5. Remember, unit fractions are fractions that have the numerator of 1. It does not matter what the denominator is, and you're going to need to know that for a few of your math journal pages as well. Overall, I'll do this last problem, and then make sure you email me or your teacher, doesn't matter who, if you have any questions throughout your math journal. I know the word problems will have to do with cooking, and they can get quite complicated, but stick to this process and you'll be just fine. One last review. This says 6 groups of 1/5 or 1/5 groups of 6. I'll do 6 groups of 1/5 because that makes more sense in my mind. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups. Each group has 1/5 in it. And now when I have that, I'll add those all together right down the line. Common denominators are already there for me. I just have to add the numerators. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all together. 5. Excuse me. I have 6 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it gives me 6/5, which is just 1/5 over a whole. So that would be 1 and 1/5. Either one of these answers would be just fine by me. This would probably be the better of the two, though, because I like to make them back into mixed numbers. Remember, give your teacher or I a email if you need any help with units 7.2 through 7.5, and have a good day, guys. Hey, 4th grade, I'm going to add one more quick thing to that last video on how to multiply fractions. I'm glad you watched up until this point because now you know how to draw multiplying fractions and you've seen how it works. But I'm sure maybe even your parents told you there's a quicker way to do it. I'm going to show you that quicker way right now. If you have a whole number and you're multiplying it by a fraction, one quick thing you can do is multiply the whole number times the numerator and keep the denominator the same. Just as if we were adding fractions, keep the denominator the same. I'll show you how that works. 4 groups of 1/3, I could draw the circles, 4 circles with 1/3 in each, and 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. But watch this, 4 times 1 is 4. I multiply the whole times the numerator, I got 4, and keep the denominator the same. 4/3, I'm already done. Although that is an improper fraction, that's equal to 1 whole and an extra third as a mixed number. That's a quick way of doing it. I'll show it again with a different problem. How about I'll turn that into a 5 times 6/7. Same process. Take the whole number, multiply it by the numerator. 5 times 6 is 30. Keep the denominator of 7 the same. 37ths. On that one, I definitely would want to divide 30 divided by 7 and get my reduced answer. But that's just a little bit quicker way. Whole number times the numerator, keep the denominator the same. I didn't show you that right away because I really want you to see how multiplication works, and I want you to see how you're repeatedly adding the fractions. But once you get good at it, this is a fast way to multiply fractions. One last little thing. If the numbers, and this might be above and beyond, like I said, above and beyond 4th grade level, but if you can do that, or these types of problems, you're on top of it. So I'm going to show you just another quick example of a problem you might see. Let's just pretend you have 3 times, and the number gets to be large, like 20 and 1/5. I'm not going to add 20 plus 20 plus 20, then 1/5 plus 1/5, then 1/5. That's going to take a lot of time, especially if this becomes a number like 28. I'm not going to go 28 plus 28 plus 28. I might make mistakes doing that. Granted, I could, but if I had a number like 3 times 20 and 1/5, I can simply take the whole number and break this apart. Multiply wholes times the wholes, and then this whole number times the fraction. You know the extended fast fact, 3 times 20 is 60. And then 3 times 1/5, 3 times the numerator 1 is 3, and keep the denominator the same. That seemed a lot faster than adding 20 and 1/5 3 times. Once again, these are tricks that help you go faster. Do they show you the process of math and multiplication? No, But do they save you a lot of time? Yes. And I hope this helps you a little bit as you do your math journals as well. Thanks, guys. Bye.